Okay, Alpha is hit. Now it's time to talk about the lore. And the Midnight lore actually looks better than ever. Blizzard have landed a return to some beloved TBC zones. They've also set up a conflict that could kind of stand with the greats, if I'm being real with you. It's a big clash between Light and Void. It's the one promised since Legion, and it goes hard. Now, today, we've gone deep and we brought everything together so that you can get all the little fragments that are being talked about everywhere, all in one place, in context, so it actually makes sense. And in doing that, I can tell you this, Blizzard have shown us more than I think they intended. So, look, this is your warning. Expect spoilers. They are big. So with that said, I'll now assume anyone currently listening is actually okay with spoilers. Like a showdown with a Voidfall in Illyria, the Sunwell's corruption into a Darkwell, there's, Lothraxion, and the Vanguard of the Light. Are they our saviors? Or will they be our new light-blind antagonists? There is so much to talk about. We found a data-mined map that doubles the size of Zalaman, and below the surface, we've discovered the true origin of the Emerald Nightmare. There is so much to get through, it's pretty damn exciting, so let's jump into the Midnight campaign. The Midnight cinematic ends, and that is the very moment that we appear at the Sunwell. We are there alongside the armies of the Light. Yes, plural, even warlocks and void priests are going to be there because the Light needs you as well. But those paladins aren't just the army of the Light we met in Legion. Many more have came. We have the Arathi, Sunwalker, Silverhand, priests and paladins from every order. There's Brother Samuel, the paladin trainer from Northshire, Leroy Jenkins, who canonically is a paladin, and a fairly important man called Aloncius Fowl. And he admits that, well, after setting up the Shadow Priest with Xal'atath, that he is partially responsible for this whole mess that we find ourselves in. Together, this bunch are the Light's vanguard, but even with them, it is barely enough. Hard decisions need to be made. Gather for a counterattack on the Voidstorm or save the people of Silvermoon. Turalyon demands an attack, but Lorthamar sends us to save the citizens. There, we find Arator, but he's dazed. Around him are slaughtered Void Revenants. He tells us he doesn't know what happened, that he felt rage and the Light overtook him, and that when he came to, everything around him was dead. And that is something you should keep in mind. So, we save who we can, and then we launch our counterattack against the Void. But it's not enough. We are pushed back to the Sunwell, and in a last desperate move, the gathered Lightcasters pray to the well. It erupts in light. It shoots pure energy into the Voidstorm. This works. It stops Xal'atath's forces from coming through. But it's a catch-22. The Paladins need to channel their prayer to keep the Voidstorm sealed. But meanwhile, Quel'Thalas is in ruins. So, the Voidstorm is plugged. We've given ourselves some time, but something is still wrong. Liadrin tells Turalyon that the Sunwell is older than human civilization, and that in all the time she's known it, it's never felt so aggressive. Turalyon says there's nothing to worry about. Just trust the Light. Pray harder. But Lorthamar, always the pragmatist, is rather worried. Since the Sunwell was cleansed in the Burning Crusade, little gardens of the Light had sprouted across Quel'Thalas. They had came to call it the Light Bloom. But the Sunwell's aggressive explosion has made the Light Bloom grow out of control. And now some regions are totally engulfed, like, as an example, the Blinding Veil dungeon. And from it, a race has appeared called the Ratani. They have one fanatical imperative: growth. Unstoppable growth. So, with that going on, a sort of twisted mixture of light and life, suddenly the Light's not looking so good. And this is reflected everywhere. Whilst exploring Silvermoon, Blood Elves tell us that the Light's vanguard does sometimes feel like an occupying army. They're pretty fanatical people after all. They say the explosion from the Sunwell was also unusual, that Turalyon and the boys didn't really know the power that they were meddling with. And as we'll find out, you, Mr. Blood Elf NPC, are in fact right. Because Turalyon throws around his weight. He demands all the resources of Silvermoon, and he reminds Lorthamar that he isn't just a guess, that he, Turalyon, is the Sunwell savior. The story then escalates. In Zalaman, Turalyon is overcome with the same light blindness we saw Arator fall victim to. In a rage, he lashes out at our newfound Amani allies. He can barely control it, and that's the point. Because you might be thinking, the Light is making people a bit spicier, a bit more righteous. But no, it actually gets a little worse than that. In our march on the Voidspire, we attack Nexus Point Xenas. There, Lothraxion, you may remember him from Legion, is overcome by the light, and he attacks us. And in our initial read, even though it very much could link back to Sire Denathrius and all of the Dreadlord conspiracy stuff, it actually does look like it's Lothraxion being overcome with the light, and we'll have something substantial on that soon. But for now, know that Lothraxion is what we now call light-blinded. Where sure, he still wants the end of Xal'atath, but within the blindness, even his allies are not pure enough for the light. Of course, there are many echoes of the Scarlet Crusade in all of this. Anyway, we finally make it to the Voidspire, Xal'atath's HQ, and our first raid encounter, which is in fact not even against the Void. No, our first raid encounter is a council fight against the light-blinded Vanguard. These people are Turalian's top lieutenants. They're the same people we saved the Sunwell with. But the light has its own agenda, and it's even turning our allies against us. And also, this is only the beginning. Turalian has not been seen in the encounter lists, and that means that the light-blinded story is something that is sure to develop throughout this expansion. To get a handle on just how bad this is, how crazy off the wall it feels, let me bring you back to some of Legion's most fundamental light versus void lore. So Legion set up Illyria and Turalian's relationship. One light, one void. And it was a bit of a challenge, where Turalian feared the void, but Illyria knew the horror of the light. And in the audio drama 1,000 Years of War, she received a vision. It's an unsettling one.
She saw the light moving through the cosmos like a ravenous predator. She saw it touch the minds of Azeroth's mortals, a touch that corrupted them forever.
Yeah, this is foreshadowed because that is Turalian and the Vanguard, but there is actually more.
She saw war. She saw the forces of the light striking back against the void. She saw darkened worlds burning in holy fire. She saw millions of creatures encased in luminous crystals the size of mountains, sustained by the light and unable to die.
That apocalyptic vision is what the light is trying to manifest through the Ratani, through the Vanguard, through the Sunwell. It may only be one facet of the light in this conflict, but if you ask me, they're setting the light up to, at its worst, be as brutal as the void. And that is something that, if you've paid attention to World of Warcraft since the very beginning, you will know all too well. Again, just look at the Scarlets. This has been established since 2004. We are now just driving it to its logical conclusion. And indeed, the conclusion of the big light versus void arc is what the Midnight expansion is supposed to be. So there may be a patch where the light tries to have a crack at Azeroth as well. Maybe in the same way that Xal'atath has. But that is not the only apocalypse going on in Midnight. So, let's check things out with the Imani. Before we launch into the Void, let's take a look at the Zul'Aman dungeon journals from the Den of Naralak, because they have shown us why the Loa turned their back on the Imani trolls. Basically, Zul'Jin and Malakras wounded their Loa of Valor, Malarak. We don't yet know what they did, but we can guess it was something to do with their suicidal attempts to power their champions with power pretty much from the Loa. Then, of course, them fighting constant unwinnable battles against Quel'Thalas. So, because of all of this, they're going to need the Loa back. They need help, just like we do. And that is because, in addition to all the regular problems, the Twilights are also back. Now, we suspect that they want to resurrect a servant of the old gods buried beneath Zul'Aman. There's nothing new on that front with the troll stories, but what is new is their name. They're called the Twilight's Blade Cult. And if you want to know more, check out our Xal'atath deep dive, because there you'll discover how she cultivated the Twilights as her personal cult for decades. But they're a bit different this time. We initially find them in the Ghostlands. We discover that Xal'atath has done to Quel'Thalas what she did to the Order of Night and the Nerubians, where she has created her own splinter faction of Blood Elves, who are Team Xal'atath. But the big news with Zul'Aman is actually this. This is a map of the revamped Quel'Thalas Legion, their Silver Moon, the Eversong Woods stretching into what used to be called the Ghostlands. and here a significantly expanded Solemn Man. Okay, let me expand it again, because turns out there's a whole other zone hidden in the map files. We know little about it. It's called the Isle of Fangs, and we can see what looks to be venom pouring from it in rivers. Now, this could be the Temple of Ulatek, the Troll Low of Serpents, but there could be something way deeper going on here, such as the exact burial place of the Carthaxi general that the Twilight's Blade are of course currently after. And if you don't know why that's a spooky thing or how it connects to Xal'atath, well, good thing we made a 37-minute long video that covers all of that. Either way, expect this as a 0.5 or perhaps even a full patch zone coming down the line. Okay, now that we've got some Amani allies, it is time to get into the fight. The Light is, of course, only one half of this expansion, and the Void Elves are not letting the Light have all the fun. The Void Elves burst into the Magister's Terrace. This is obviously deeply illegal in Blood Elf society, especially because the ban of the Void Elves from the city is mostly still in effect. But they need something called the Cyanoshur of Twilight. It's a locus of void power that, apparently, they can harness to get us into the Voidstorm. And in this dungeon, whilst the Light does everything it can to make us nervous, we see the Void Elves are proving themselves to be not all evil. They pull off the heist. They get us to Voidstorm. And once there, they plant immense gravitational stabilizers and create a beachhead for us. And I'm happy to say that this is full going through the dark portal energy, a near suicidal mission into the unknown. It's pretty awesome. And what we find is a realm of chaos, one totally dominated by Xal'atath. She's brought her own twisted form of order to this world as well, where she places herself at the top of the Dominar's feudal hierarchy. Everything there is based on devouring. You serve or you're eaten. If you're strong enough, then you devour your boss and step up the ranks. And with the forces of evil pushed back to their fortress, the level up campaign ends. But the thing is, we pretty much know how the endgame campaigns are going to throw down. So, as if this hasn't already been spoilery enough, let's just do the major things. We have 3 key bits of information to stitch together here. First, the raids. There are 3, with March of Quel'Thanas as the capstone raid. Quel'Thanas being, of course, the island where the Sunwell is located. Now, we have their raid journals, and because of that, we know who we're going to be fighting. But we've also got this, the War of Light and Shadow. This sounds pretty cool, and what it is one of the endgame campaign chapters. Now, the good news is, none of those quests are in the alpha, but the titles alone tell a bit of a story. It begins with a foothold, either us getting a foothold in Voidstorm, or maybe Xal'atath getting a foothold on the Sunwell Isle. Next, uniting the elves. Let's be frank, this isn't going to be a reunion between the Highborn, the Naga, and the Night Elves, but still we're going to do something involving blood, void, and if this area called Silverwing Sanctuary is anything to go by, perhaps the High Elves. Maybe they'll be an allied race. But then we have something huge. This chapter is called the Darkwell. So from that, we can pretty much tell the Sunwell gets corrupted, and we actually know how. It is by the Dark Naru, Lura. And that is the very Naru that Illyria has been carrying around since Legion, since, in the dungeon, she absorbed its form. Then, the next campaign chapter takes us to the Voidspire raid, and its final encounter is none other than Illyria Windrunner. Seemingly, she's given into the Void Whispers and has gone mad. She then, supposedly, lashes out at us, and that brings us to the peak of the fight, called the Battle of the Bridge. And this begins the March on Quel'Thanas raid arc, its final boss being Lura, again the Void Naru that Illyria absorbed back in Legion. And there's a line from Xal'atath that this calls back to. This is what Xal'atath said to the player right after Illyria absorbed the Naru.
The caterpillar has become the butterfly. She is all but ours now.
At the time, we thought she meant Illyria. We just didn't know that Illyria was basically carrying around a ready-built Sunwell corruptor for this entire span of time. Though, of course, we did have ample evidence. The very reason why Illyria is exiled from her homeland is that the last time she went there, with the Void Elf storyline, she almost corrupted the Sunwell, so it's hardly a surprise. But you might be thinking, hang on, if we fight Illyria in one raid, but something that she's been containing is present in a later raid, does that mean we kill her? What does it mean? Well, thus far, my assumption is that Illyria has whatever goes on at the end of the first raid, and that basically we bring her back from the brink in some way. Essentially, what I think Blizzard are going for is that the light and the void are pushing some of our characters to the absolute limits of their personality, be that Illyria flipping out and taking a crack at the lot of us, or Turalyon perhaps becoming so tyrannical or so zealous in his belief of the light that he'll end up doing bad things. You know, ends justify the means sort of behavior. Now, what this also likely means is we get Illyria back. But Xal'atath will, it seems, have her dark well. The final chapter then is called Dawn of a New Well. What happens there? Well, I think Xal'atath gets her dark well, and then something happens, and we probably cleanse said dark well. But that is not merely the end of the story. This obviously is only the beginning of Midnight, and we are still missing one massive element. Azeroth, the World Soul. What about all of that? I mean, it's been such a storyline, why am I only mentioning it now? Well, this may even be a contender for Midnight's craziest lore, and honestly, it's pretty awesome, although it is a little bit of a deep cut. So, in the Haranir Zone, Harandar, we may have found the origin of the Emerald Nightmare. Of course, we already know some of that origin, but we get some new details that I think are pretty awesome, actually. Basically, a missing link in the Old God's plan. And what we've definitely found is the next step in the World Soul story, and it all hinges on a place that you have visited. And if you're playing Legion Remix, which you may have visited on a daily basis for the last few days, and that is the Rift of Aln. That's where we fight Xavius in Legion expansion. What we didn't know back then was that those ruins in the distance were Harandar. So if you are fighting Xavius and you look into the distance, you'll actually see a zone that we probably end up in the Midnight expansion. It's pretty cool. It just is that in the Xavius fight, we were seeing it from the inside. Essentially, the Rift of Aln is a realm at the confluence of all of the World Tree's roots. It is not a physical place, it is more of a dream realm within Azeroth. It's where the Haranir live. But they were not always alone. Harandar once had something called the Cradle of Alanhara. Inside this cradle was a sleeping goddess called Alanhara. But she was taken from the cradle, so the story goes. And this turned it into a twisted nightmare realm known to us as the Rift of Aln. Creatures emerge from this realm and they would attack the Haranir. And this drives some of the Haranir to forsake their oaths to their goddess. Those join the Shulka, who guard the Rift of Aln. And it's actually there where we enter the Dream Rift. We fight Chimeras, the undreamt god, a creature that's dwelt in the hollow loneliness of the Rift so long that it has become godlike. I suppose bathed in whatever crazy energies and psychedelic nightmare shit's going on in there. But this is where it gets crazy. The Rift of Aln is a piece of lore that goes back to this. This is the novel Stormrage and its Cataclysm lore. It was a place of primeval energy, yet it was also Xavius' seat of power. It was the core of the Emerald Nightmare. Now, we were told that behind Xavius was an even greater power, that something had anchored in the Rift of Aln, something that actually existed deep under the ocean. That something was, of course, N'Zoth. And that ties our lore together. That means that N'Zoth is likely the one who kidnapped Alanhara, who kidnapped that sleeping goddess from her cradle. And this traces back to the creation of the Emerald Nightmare. We, of course, were told that the World Tree's roots had touched Saronite, the blood of Yogg-Saron, and that Yogg-Saron, the old god, then opened the way. But we were told that it was N'Zoth who became the Lord of the Emerald Nightmare. How did he create the nightmare? How did he build his dreaming city? I don't know exactly, but maybe he kidnapped the sleeping goddess. Maybe he turned her cradle into an engine of nightmare and used it to corrupt the Emerald Dream. Whoever this goddess is, she exists within Azeroth. She may even be a facet of the World Soul, or one of its children. Whatever it is, I think it's the next step in Azeroth's story in this World Soul saga. And with that, The big spoiler dump is pretty much done. But don't click away because there's something you need to know about all of this lore. I decided to do the video in this format because if I just did random little bits of video here and there, it would just be a confusing mess. And one of the things with the character of Xal'atath is that her lore spans basically millions of years. Now, I have done for her what we did for this video. So if you want to watch Xal'atath's story from the very start to the very beginning of the Midnight Expansion, watch this video next.